But please remember that you have 3 minutes to give your public input, and the meeting is being recorded. First, we have Carl Aguila, who's the parent.
Good evening again, board. My name is Carl Arguila. I'm delivering these public comments at the San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center board meeting on September 26, 2018. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a link to my blog in the comments below, www.sgprc.net. This evening, in my 3 minutes, I'm going to very quickly touch on 3 different items: the ongoing situation with my son, Kevin, the issue of Mr. Penman's legacy as he enters his well-deserved retirement, and the future direction of the San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center. I have previously reported to this board that my son, Kevin, became homeless for 13 months while this agency paid their vendor $10,000 a month for services. I would urge members of the public who are not familiar with my son's case to please review what has been done to our family by this agency on my blog, www.sgprc.net. As you know, Mr. Penman has announced that he will be retiring in December. Please know that we will do our best to document and record Mr. Penman's legacy with this agency. I am pleased to state that currently on Google, the top search result for the term Keith Penman is our blog. We intend to assure that Mr. Penman's legacy is always number 1 on Google. It is important that Mr. Penman's legacy with this agency be documented, not only to seek justice for vulnerable people like my son, whose life has been so devastated by this agency, but for many other vulnerable people. May I remind this board of those precious, vulnerable people who were sexually abused by your agency's vendor, Casa de Angeles, under Mr. Penman's watch. You know that case, of course, because you paid out a financial settlement. It is also important that Mr. Penman's legacy become a part of the history of our community. As you know, I'm the son of a developmentally disabled person. The history of this community includes abuses of power and authority over the lives of some of our community's most vulnerable souls. Finally, I ask the board to consider the future of this agency after Mr. Penman's retirement. As our community enters the world of self-determination, it is imperative that this regional center be led by an executive director who will move us into the future rather than cling to the past. Please consider that the San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center's next executive director must be recruited from outside of this agency and from outside of the regional center system. The next executive director must be free of the institutional mentality which has been engendered by Mr. Penman. The next executive director should have been born after the passage of the Lanterman Act. He or she should be steeped in a society in which developmental disabilities be viewed as opportunities rather than restrictions. And finally, the next executive director should be a person of color, someone who may have personally experienced the pain of discrimination, prejudgment, or just plain hatred. We need an executive director who will lead the San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center into the 21st century. I just hope that this board will do that job. Thank you again for your patience.
Next, we have Julie Edmund McKenzie, who's from State Council.
Good evening, board members. I've introduced myself before a few months back, but just to remind you, I'm with the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, the LA office. And this evening, I'd like to share with you something that we have available to the public. We have a lot of resources. One of many things that we do is to publish important information. I brought two with me this evening. One is called Why Work is Better in English and Spanish. And it's really about how employment is always the better option rather than living just on Social Security. And it talks about the interplay of employment and your benefits. The other one is about what I think is one of the best pieces of law to come out of the federal government in the last 5 years, the ABLE Act. This is a brief summary about how the ABLE Act functions and other resources you can go to learn more about it. I can't urge you enough to consider setting up an ABLE account. They really are one of the very few paths out of poverty for people with developmental disabilities. So we have these also in English and Spanish. I brought a few copies. They're over on the table. Help yourself. If you would like more, we're always happy to print them and mail them to you or send you an electronic copy. It's all free of charge. Thanks very much for your time.